Wybalenna is one of the most sacred places for Aboriginal people in Lutruwita. It is Australia's first mission site. It is the largest known mass burial place for Palawa men, women and the tiniest of children. The war that was fought for Lutruwita is the longest and most violent conflict engaged on Australian soil. Fighting to protect their land and each other, Palawa resisted a foreign invader in a 30-year guerrilla offensive. Germ warfare, famine, abduction and slavery of women and children were all deployed in a calculated offensive against them. The colonial narrative of the dispossession of the Palawa is largely shrouded in a conciliatory tone. But this mythology of non-violent settlement does not convey the truth that this country's first treaty was offered on false pretense to a free people and was dishonoured by the government. One by one, surviving families were exiled to Flinders Island to the place now called Wybalenna, a word which means black men's houses. This remote prison was established in the image of a social experiment in cultural concentration and conversion. The site was associated with sickness and death. After a funeral service in the chapel, the dead were taken into the surgeon's quarters and disemboweled. An insatiable trade in bodies was established. Heads, hands and organs removed and distributed to white institutions in Britain and Europe. Colonial governors would visit and depart with children and skulls. Bodies were buried en masse at a peak rate of 1 a week in the cemetery and were regularly exhumed to retrieve bones. After 15 years of exile, 47 surviving Palawa directly petitioned the British Queen Victoria for their release and return to their country. Even as a site of humanitarian trauma, Wybalenna quickly lapsed from the national consciousness and into ruin. After a century of private ownership and farming, Wybalenna was returned to the Aboriginal community in 1999. Since that return, federal and state governments have offered no ongoing financial assistance for Wybalenna's care, and the site has remained relatively unused. Through truth-telling efforts spearheaded by the Aboriginal Land Council of Tasmania, the community began conversations about Wybalenna's future in 2022. In early 2023, then Chair Michael Mansell invited Poppy and I into a conversation about Wybalenna's future. He explained to us, "Wybalenna is sacred to our people. It holds the graves of the cheated, and we firmly believe we need to make sure the deaths of those kind souls are remembered and honoured. We will determine what feeling Wybalenna holds for us as a people. Then you will help us build that feeling." Our work for the Land Council is focused on the entirety of the site, prioritising Aboriginal community amenity first. This is centred around two areas: a new ablutions to support community camping on the site and the renewal of the Wybalenna homestead. The current homestead was built in the 1890s atop the ruins of the Commandant's cottage. Bricks were taken from the ruins of the Aboriginal barracks for its construction. After the return in 1999, the homestead was a difficult place for community to use. The interiors were unserviced and internal linings were decaying. Remediation of the homestead concentrates on the rear annex, focusing on the needs of elders for areas for bathing and washing. That amenity is realised through a program of work that is nearly invisible but critical to communal comfort. Much of the work was undertaken with donated materials and pro bono labour. Led by Forrest Whitten and Uwe Feist over an 8-week intensive period, the remediation focused on managing moisture ingress and water tightness. Where new elements are added for internal amenity, they are highly crafted, pioneer harvested, salvaged hewn pine, also donated. The works concentrated on service upgrades and improving airflow to the masonry of the homestead. Driven by cultural priorities and seeking to cleanse colonial anxiety, the homestead interiors are being clarified and cleansed of association with stylistic pretensions. Instead, the interiors have been stripped back to the materials that were hewn from the actual place, almost as if to seek country's material being, to strip away the pretension of the surface, to return it to a living tectonic tradition of Palawa making. The original timberwork and limewash brickwork is exposed through this clarifying, and the brick imparts a warmth to the light and feeling of the interiors. Allowed to penetrate from multiple sources, this strategy also reduces internal glare. The architecture is consciously frail. An amenity is offered opportunistically. New layers are elemental and honest in their economy, but also offer a sense of generosity and warmth. And these new layers accommodate occupation, but also clarify the story of the fabric. The homestead renewal has largely been a process of materialising generosity and amenity with incredibly limited means. It raises questions about the nature of cultural heritage and the prioritisation of stylistic anxieties over concerns of cultural well-being and communal memory. With limited resources, the frailty of these insertions say, "I see you, and I hold your need."
A significant barrier to community use of Wybalenna was the fact that it was entirely unserviced, with no running water, toilet facilities or electricity. This first new structure on the site in over a century directly addresses this lack of amenity and is autonomous in its servicing. It provides separated bathing, washing and dry composting toilets for community use while camping. Built entirely from donated material, the pavilion recalls Palawa spatial tradition. Traditional use of ceremonial ochre was denied at Wybalenna, so the old people daubed themselves in mutton bird oil and the rust from convict farming equipment. The use of oxidising steel for the project draws from this history. Needing to be durable, low in maintenance and direct, 5mm oxidising steel sheet was generously donated by BlueScope. This singular material is both enclosure and structure, while also acting as a memorial fabric. The structure required a highly resolved prefabricated system. All prefabrication and metalworks were donated by Chris Brothers in Launceston. The pavilion was delivered in a system of parts by ship to the site and constructed over 2 weeks by Rory Wright. It is situated within a grove of Limana, Casuarina, and is approached obliquely. The siting takes advantage of the existing slope for gravity-fed waste reticulation. And by being open, the pavilion's amenities multiplied. Detailing is direct and serviceable. Glazed slots between structural roof trays bring daylight in to the bathing and toilet areas. Water is hand pumped to minimise overuse. Utility is lean and consistent with the materiality of the primary structure. The scarcity of water is managed by simple camp shower. The roof is detailed to allow rainwater overflow in wet periods to seep directly back into the site, so that the pavilion remains integrated to the water systems of country. How Wybalenna must feel as a place for Aboriginal friends, their families and elders is unfathomable to us. These small contributions seek to soften and accommodate communal needs in a sacred setting. It is not lost on us the privilege of this architectural task. This Palawa community-led effort heralds us into an age of truth-telling. Wybalenna calls us to sorry business as a nation and tells us that we have much work to do.